Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Films and Stuff. I'm Ethan, joined by most valuable Pete. Pete, it is our weekly stream or skip episode. We've been doing this for how many weeks now?
More than a year into this, and we're probably around 35, maybe 40 weeks deep into this year.
We know the rules. Our regular listeners know the rules. Pete is an expert at recapping them. I usually give him 30 seconds. Lately, I've been cutting it down to 15 seconds. I'm not going to chop it to 10. Can you recap the rules in 15 seconds or less?
I'll give it a shot. Ethan has prepared a list of TV shows he'd like me to watch. I have done the same for him. Every week, we randomly assign each other a new show to watch. We watch at least 2 episodes or 30 minutes if it's a feature-length show. And based on that, we determine if that show is worthy of being streamed or skipped.
And if you've followed us regularly, you know that Pete and I go through the highest of highs sometimes.
Yeah.
We go through the lowest of lows sometimes. Generally, I think we started off this year pretty good with a bunch of must-subscribes. Then we had a little bit of a summer lull. But, spoiler alert, I think today we're on to something.
100%. You know what? In fact, I have so many opinions about mine that I think it's better if you start with yours this week.
Without further ado, I had the show called Swagger on Apple TV Plus. It's a sports drama series. It came out in 2021. A second season was released in 2022. Not sure what they're going to do after that. And it is apparently loosely based on the childhood of NBA star Kevin Durant. I'm sure a lot of listeners know Kevin Durant. He went to the University of Texas. He was with the Oklahoma City Thunder for a lot of years, joined the Golden State Warriors, won 2 championships, went to Brooklyn. Now he's with the Phoenix Suns. Still one of the predominant players in the National Basketball Association, a superstar among superstars. So this is apparently loosely based on his life as kind of like a 14-year-old. So let me first talk a little bit about the casting, because I think the casting is fantastic. And to be honest, it starts and ends with a very nice young man named Isaiah Hill. He plays the lead character named Jace Carson. And Jace Carson is kind of like this basketball phenom. In the show, he's 14 years old. And he is apparently already getting a lot of recognition as being a great basketball player. And not just like, hey, he may have a future in college. Like, people are already talking about him as like, he's already going to go to the NBA. And he openly talks about going to the NBA. His mother is also like very, very active in kind of, let's say, managing, his path towards stardom. And then the other star of the show is his basketball coach, O'Shea Jackson Jr., Ice Cube's oldest son. And he plays this role fantastically. Isaiah Hill, by the way, apparently is a very accomplished basketball player. And he's the nephew of Lauryn Hill.
Lauryn Hill, the singer?
The singer. He's honestly fantastic actor. I'm really surprised I haven't heard anything about him. Like, he should be in everything. He is fantastic, and he's legitimately a very, very good athlete and basketball player. Like, they'll just show him like zoomed out shooting. All right, so I love the cast. The premise is there's a young kid, and he's a very, very good basketball player. And, he, with the help of his mother, with the help of his coach, are trying to navigate all these not just like adolescent complications or life complications, but also kind of the ugliness, I guess, of this kind of like youth basketball industry, with the goal that ultimately he's going to end up a professional basketball player. It shows a lot of seediness of this youth basketball structure. Traditionally, There's kind of like the high school, but now like a lot of very good basketball players kind of like hop around high schools to find the best opportunity, either giving them the best exposure or the best facilities or the best coaching. But then there's kind of like the amateur circuit, right? They call it the AAU. And that's something where you can kind of like choose your team. And there's a lot of competition to get people on your team so that the team is successful. There's a lot of sponsorship. There's a lot of kind of like ugly business, even among the coaches. And this starts to dive into a little bit of that. O'Shea Jackson, his character is supposedly above all of this and a little bit of a purist. But just like every drama, it shows that there are realities. And, sometimes I don't want to have to say like you sacrifice your morals, but like, for example, they've got like a travel budget, right? They want to go to like these different tournaments. They need sponsors. They need money. Like none of this is free for uniforms and stuff. There's some compromises that they need to make in order to kind of like get the resources that they need. It just paints, I think, I don't know if it's accurate because I've never experienced it, but it shows, I guess, what is kind of the underbelly of this industry and all the different kind of like conflicts of interest and challenges and things like that. How do I feel about the show? Very entertaining. I like the characters, and that hasn't always been the case in every show that we've watched. I don't think it's a particularly dynamic plot. I mean, it's following a guy. He's a phenom. He's great at basketball. There's a lot of challenges, but we kind of know where it's going. I mean, he's going to have some ups and downs, but ultimately, he's going to be successful. The plot's not really strong in that sense. The characters are great. They're all likable. It moves fast. The pace is good. And it adds a little bit of, something different to the Apple TV Plus lineup, which doesn't have a whole lot of sports series right now. I give it a mooch. I cannot give it a must subscribe just because it just doesn't have like enough dynamic plot in it. Maybe that's partly because it's supposed to be based on a real life story, but it does feel very much like a dramatic biopic. We all kind of know where it's going to go. We know there's going to be some challenges. We kind of see the ups and the downs coming before they actually happen. Action sequences are good, but they're not like Hustle was way better, I think, as a basketball movie.
Yeah.
But again, those guys were legitimate NBA players. We're talking about, high schoolers, 14 years old. So you can't expect, the same amount of like slam dunks and action that you would at a different level. So I cannot give this a must subscribe, but definitely it's a solid mooch. And if you're interested in hoops, if you really like Kevin Durant, if you want to see something that's not sci-fi and is a little bit lower stakes in terms of a biopic, very, very good choice.
Oh, okay.
That is Swagger, 2 seasons, Apple TV Plus, O'Shea Jackson Jr., Isaiah Hill, lovely cast, love everything about the people. And like I said, that has not always been the case for all the shows we watch. Sometimes you love the show, hate the characters. Here it's kind of refreshing to actually like the characters.
That actually sounds very encouraging, to be honest.
Yep. So without further ado, we get to the main event, my friend. You've been talking about this all week. You've been building up the hype train. The hype train has left the stadium. It's chugging along. Tell us.
So this week I had to watch a show on Netflix called Vortex.
Vortex.
Right off the bat, let me tell you, the streak is over. I've had 14 odd weeks of middling to average shows, mostly bad, but some average shows. Again, even Quarterback a couple weeks ago, it took me more than a week before I made it a must subscribe.
Yeah, that's right.
I messaged you 10 minutes before the first episode ended and said, if the second episode holds up the way the first has, stop what you're doing, take a break from work, watch this show.
Yeah, you did.
And I'm pleased to tell you, I watched all 6 episodes. I finished it up. This is one of the strongest must subscribes of the year.
You know what? I have two main comments. First comment, I am thrilled for you. Sincerely, as a friend, as a co-host, as the wind beneath the wings of the Films and Stuff logo, I'm so happy for you that you got a great show to watch. Honestly. My second comment is, this is actually the perfect case study for the stream or skip episode, because when I assigned this to you, it's not like I thought this was going to be bad, but I never, ever would have expected that you would come back and say this is one of the strongest must-subscribes you've ever seen. This is exactly why we do this.
And it gets better, because this isn't even an English show. It's French.
Is it subtitled or it's dubbed?
I watched it in subtitles. It's a foreign language show, which makes it all the more unlikely that your average viewer would sit and watch this.
Yeah, and French cinema, all of our respect to the French, is not really known for these dynamic television series, right?
Not at all. French cinema is critically fantastic, but there's, and again, forgive me, French fans, I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but there's only so many black and white shows about a guy smoking a cigarette, drinking an espresso, and ruminating about his love life that I can take.
You're right. You know what? 100% true, which is even a lot of the great like French movies, and there have been some like over recently, but they all usually take like these very nuanced topics.
Super esoteric.
Yeah, like Avalanche.
In any case.
Yeah, tell me about this.
I think this is right up your alley.
100% I'm excited.
This is a sci-fi show, but you don't think that it's sci-fi. It's relatively grounded. So it's not sci-fi like there's lasers and, space battles or anything like that. The premise is that in the first episode, we meet a very young, loving couple who just had a baby. The man is a police officer. The woman is like a judge or a lawyer.
Yeah.
They're not struggling per se, but they're first-time parents, so they're always just checking on the baby, that kind of thing, the usual. We learn that the wife, the way she handles stress and the way she handles her nervous tics is she goes for long runs.
Okay.
The guy is like in a stupor, not just because he's in a loving marriage, not just because he's just had a baby, but this is 1998. France has just won the Football World Cup.
Okay.
She wakes up early in the morning, the day after or the week after that they've won the World Cup. She goes for a run, and we find out that unfortunately during that run, she's fallen off of the jogging path, off a cliff, and she's found dead on a beach.
At this point in the show, what are you thinking? This is like the opening?
This is like the first 5 minutes, and I was just like, uh-oh, I think the streak is going to continue. Flash forward 27 years later.
27 years, okay.
Okay. So the year is now 2025.
Okay.
And this same guy shows up on the same beach where his wife was found dead because another dead body is there. And he's now like obviously a detective. So he's been called in to investigate this. And they have these drones that is taking like crime scene pictures. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Actually, that's a really good use of drones. You get like a really high level view of the thing. And the drones look like normal drones that you and I could buy from any, hobby shop. It doesn't look anything futuristic so far. He then goes back to the police station. They upload the drone footage. And then he puts on a pair of these fancy-ass glasses and walks into a room that looks like the holodeck, and the entire thing becomes a virtual reality scene. It's a recreation of the crime scene.
So he can like look at the evidence and stuff.
He can look at the evidence. He can get a bird's eye view, and then he can like control the passage of time because of video recordings. And like they have ways of kind of just using evidence, using like the videos, using like I guess, inference. They can kind of move things back and forth. So imagine the holodeck from Star Trek, but used only for crime scene analysis.
Okay, that's cool.
Super cool. Actually, a pretty brilliant concept. So you're just like, okay, that's kind of nifty. You know, I can see where this is going. I like that. And while he's in that simulated crime scene, looking at the different evidence, like he sees like the body, etc., he sees a woman jogging through the beach, and that woman is his wife from 27 years ago. And so he takes off his glasses, and then, of course, the whole thing goes back to being a regular room. And he's like, what the hell? He thinks, oh, this is obviously a glitch, or maybe I'm going through some kind of post-traumatic stress because this is the same beach my wife was found dead on. So, you know, it could just be that.
So he sees her as a hologram.
He sees her as like this virtual construct running through this beach.
Okay.
And so he doesn't know what's going on. But this time he puts the glasses back on, he goes back in, and he realizes he can actually interact with her.
Like he's talking to her in the virtual reality?
Yeah, exactly.
And she talks to him?
And she's talking back to him, and they're having a normal one-to-one conversation.
What?
Yeah. And because it's 27 years later, and he's got a beard now, she doesn't know that that's her husband.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, exactly. This is where the show goes crazy, because normally we only ever see the side of the story from the protagonist who's in quote unquote the real world.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's like, go back home and you'll find my secret stash of cigarettes that I hide in a box of cereal. Even though I promised you I had quit smoking, I hadn't.
No way. So he says to this girl who's his wife, does she know that she's a hologram, or she thinks it's real life?
That's the crazy part.
Oh my gosh.
She doesn't know.
She thinks it's real. And he's like, I'm in a simulation. And he's like, I'm your husband, 27. Oh my gosh.
And so he thinks he's losing his mind or something, but he goes along with this, right?
Okay.
Here's where things go crazy. The perspective shifts and we go back in time to her life.
Okay.
And she becomes the protagonist. And so we see her come back from the run from the beach. Yeah. And she goes back and checks the cereal box and finds the pack of cigarettes. So all of a sudden, the man on the beach that she saw, who claims to be her husband from 27 years in the future, is her husband, and she doesn't understand what's going on. He then sits her back down and says, this is the 27-year-old future man, says, you're going to die in 11 days from now.
Oh, no way.
And so this now becomes a time travel show.
Oh.
Through this virtual reality construct in the present, he is able to go back in time, or at least communicate with his wife, who died under mysterious circumstances. We learned that there's mysterious circumstances. Everyone thought that she just died because she slipped off of the jogging track and fell onto the beach. But of course, that's not the case, because why would it be?
Right.
And so now it becomes a race against time, because for some reason, every day in the present time is also a day in the past. Oh. So he's got 11 days for her to figure out how to stop from dying.
Well, don't run. Don't go running that day.
Here's where it gets crazy.
Did they suggest that? That seems to fix it.
Here's where it gets crazy. Every time he goes in that machine and suggests a change to her, and every time she changes, his life in the present changes entirely.
Oh, that's like the typical butterfly effect.
The butterfly effect. I'm not going to tell you more because I really think you're going to love it. It's
this sounds so good.
Exactly. Because it went from being a relatively average sci-fi show about this guy who's seeing a virtual reality construct of his wife, to then being, oh, by the way, she's not actual virtual reality. She's definitely a glitch, but she's real 27 years from now. It's unbelievable. I mean, Ethan, There's so much more I want to tell you. Okay, I'll tell you one example of the butterfly effect. Okay, so he wants to test.
I love that you can't hold back. I love that you can't hold back.
It's so good. It's so good. He suggests that they run an experiment to test a theory about this being real or not. He's got a picture of all of them at a World Cup celebration party.
Okay.
He tells his wife from 27 years ago, skip the party for whatever reason.
Okay.
And then he checks the photograph the next day, and she's not in the photograph anymore.
Okay.
It's like a little bit of Back to the Future.
Yeah.
But because of that, something different happens. I'm not going to tell you what. There is a butterfly effect. So now it's a juggling act. How do I save my wife, who I'm very much in love with? How do I stop the present from being changed because he's now remarried? He's got another son. He's got another family.
Oh, shit. He's remarried?
Yeah, because it's 27 years later. And so,
man,
you know,
that's going to create major problems in his life.
Tell me about it. Oh,
it's French, so it's a ménage à trois.
So good. Yeah, right. But it's so good. So his present is continuing to change. You know, his relationships are changing in real time because he's trying to save his relationship in the past. They figure out that, of course, it wasn't an accident. She was murdered. Then it becomes a murder mystery in the present and the past.
Oh, yeah.
So they're trying to figure out who committed this murder. How did they commit this murder? How do we stop this murder from happening? Oh my God. It's so good. It's so tense. And it's only 6 episodes. That's it.
Is the technology, it sounds like at first when you were describing this, I really thought it was sci-fi and like technology was going to play a big part. But now it seems like it's not.
Not at all.
It seems like it's just a medium for the...
It's just a simple medium. That's the beauty of it, is that they took this relatively vague or amorphous concept of time travel and combined it with something that most people will vaguely understand if you use, you know, the Star Trek analogy of the holodeck.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they use that as the medium of communication. It's just a means to an end.
What year is this show? And it's only 1 season, right?
Yeah, 2023. It just came out.
Oh, man. I don't know how I found this on Netflix. Probably one of the, it was kind of like suggested for you ones. But I have to say, I'm so proud of Streamer Skip because absolutely, this is probably not a show.
I 100% would never have bothered because I would have clicked on the little down arrow to look at the description. It would have been very clear to me because the first thing it says is French. I would have said, thanks, but no thanks. I'm not really interested in watching a foreign language show. I'm out.
Usually you and I really rant or rail against 6-episode series.
Yeah.
But I have to say, there's something nice about, if you think of it in like movie terms, like a very extended movie. Sometimes if it's just one standalone story, sometimes 6 episodes is actually fulfilling.
Yeah. It's the TV series equivalent of a 90-minute movie. Instead of a 22-episode slog of a season, you just get 6 tight, concise episodes. Each one ends with a crazy-ass cliffhanger that makes you want to see the next episode. You don't need more than that. It's perfect.
You finished it in how many days? 1 day? Or you just took 2 days on it?
I watched the first episode on 1 day, and then I watched episodes 2 through 6 on the second. I couldn't stop. I just couldn't stop.
I mean, listeners, Pete messaged me, you know, like your phone dings, and I got the ding, 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 like exactly like that. And it was, dude, are you there? Dude, this show, you've got to watch it. Vortex is amazing. Like that was exactly the messages that I got. It was so positive and so like adamant that the show was great. I was like, oh man, like I can't wait to hear about
and this is totally up your alley because A, it's not too time consuming. B, it's sci-fi adjacent. And C, it's a time travel show. It's a very unique twist on a time travel show. I love it.
I love time travel.
Production value, super high. I don't think this is an expensive show because if you think about it, in terms of scenes, you've got a home, you've got a
Yeah.
police station, you've
Yeah.
got like a lawyer's office, you've
Yeah.
got a beach in some seaside in the south of France. With all due respect, they may be very famous, but a bunch of actors that aren't internationally famous, but
Yeah.
they may be very famous in France, but at least internationally, not
Yeah.
so much. You've got one room that looks like a holodeck. I mean, painted black with some rolls of masking tape. That's all you really need for that.
Yeah.
And you've got a bunch of Oakleys. That's all it takes, right? You don't need it. There's nothing else.
You say Oakley's?
Yeah, like the sunglasses, because that's the virtual reality glasses look like a pair of Oakleys.
Oh man, I feel like you transported me back to high school.
Yeah.
Dude, where are my Oakleys?
Yeah,
Dude,
exactly.
where are my Oakleys? You sold me on the show. I think you've sold everyone on the show. Is this show due to the writer's strike? Are we now getting more and more of this from Netflix because there's a lack of Hollywood content and we're going to start seeing stuff like this now?
So I don't know if this show is because of the writer's strike, but I will say that this show is a pleasant change that we may not have noticed unless it were the writer's strike.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure the show came out earlier this year, well before the strikes, or just as the strikes were announced, which means that the show was probably in production last year at the earliest.
Okay.
This is before the writer's strike. That's one. Two, it's a French production, which means it's French unions, which is a totally different thing from the Hollywood unions. Yeah. In that regard, I don't think this is a result of the strike, but I would suggest that shows like this are going to get increased visibility because if not today, within the next couple of months, new shows are going to dry up on air.
Yeah.
Existing episodes, future episodes, all that kind of stuff is going to dry up for at least 6 months. Even if the strike ended today.
Yeah.
Yeah. You still have a backlog of 3 months to catch up on. That'll take time.
Least. I think Netflix is going to be the biggest test case, right? They're a lot bigger than the other streaming platforms. But if Netflix is able to supplement the traditional Hollywood content with some of things like this, I think it's really going to undermine the writer's strike. Disney's a tougher case because Disney is only taking Disney stuff. They probably have like some Hulu backlog that they can do, but some of the things I've noticed on Netflix, Suits, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like they've kind of
huge comeback.
Yeah, they've kind of recycled some of these things that were all very good shows and just were kind of like lost in the shuffle of all the new stuff. They've done a good job of kind of like bringing some of those to the forefront again. And now if they're able to give us a steady diet of documentaries and Vortex-like stuff, that's possibly going to see them through the writer's strike, and it probably reduces a lot of the leverage that the writers thought that they had if they don't see Netflix dying. I think Disney is a different case because Disney is really reliant on their own intellectual properties. HBO, let's not even go there. They're all over the place. Apple TV Plus, probably reliant a lot on the writers as well, huh?
Yeah, so Apple TV, I think especially because I think their strategy has also been all original programming.
Yeah, all original programming.
And so not to undermine the writers and the actors, okay? I'm not trying to say this as, screw those guys or screw the studios. Yeah. This is just me being as impartial.
Yeah.
Of all the major streaming platforms, Netflix and then Amazon Prime, as much as I hate to say it, are the two studios or the two streaming platforms that are the most independently secured in the sense that
diversified
Netflix,
from Hollywood.
Exactly, because Netflix got it started by licensing content. It wasn't making any of its own. Let's put it this way. They have a lot more experience in going out and acquiring shows from other markets.
All right. So positive streamer skip this week. Even Swagger was very solid. You obviously rave about Vortex.
Again, honestly, listeners, as soon as this episode ends, stop what you're doing.
Run. Don't walk.
Absolutely.
Run.
If you're a fan of sci-fi that's not too sci-fi, if you're a fan of time travel, if you're a fan of murder mysteries, this is the one for you.
All right. What are the assignments for next week's episode of Streamer Skip?
You're watching on Netflix a show that just ended this year, but I really enjoyed it. It's a show called Alice in Borderland.
You've seen it?
I have.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how it's on this list, but I have. You know what? Actually, I know how it's on this list. It's on this list because
I put it on the list. Yeah.
It's another example of what makes a good streamer skip, because this is a Japanese show.
Oh.
So I want you to have a look at it. Alice in Borderland, it's on Netflix.
Okay.
I have a show called Queenmaker, also on Netflix.
All right. I have to say, for the next foreseeable future, we may honestly be on Netflix more often than not.
Not because, we have a bias, but I think just by the way Netflix's business strategy is structured,
Content volume,
in terms of its content, that's absolutely right. It's that of all the platforms, they're the ones with the best international approach. Of course, Amazon Prime is as well, but I think Netflix was at it longer, so they've got some of the, I don't want to say better content, but they've got more, a greater variety of content from a greater variety of regions.
Yeah. All right, so that is Stream or Skip. I had a very solid mooch on Swagger on Apple TV Plus. Pete had a breathless orgasm over Vortex on Netflix. I think that's really something I've got to watch. So I'm really excited about that. The way you described it is fantastic.
I really think you're going to enjoy it. All the more surprising because it's a French show. And this is not a knock on French shows. It's a knock on the fact that I don't normally want to watch a foreign language show unless it's assigned to me. And because of the way Streamer Skip works, I wouldn't have seen this otherwise.
So in any case, Pete, I'm going to wrap it up. But before I do, can you tell everybody where they should be giving us comments, feedback, suggestions, ringing the bell, dinging the bell?
Absolutely. Listeners, I want your feedback specifically on Vortex. This is really a phenomenal show. I urge you all highly watch it. Please let us know what your thoughts are. You can tweet at us at F&S Podcast. You can DM us on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast. You can even email us, aloha@filmsandstuffpodcast.com. But the best way to let us know how much you enjoyed Vortex, leave a comment below this video, and then like this video, and then subscribe to our channel, and then hit that notification bell, because that way you'll be the first to know when we find the next Vortex.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us for Stream or Skip on the Films and Stuff podcast. We will come back to you next week with more, hopefully, recommendations, but definitely reviews.
Fingers crossed. Thanks, Ethan.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day ahead. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.